Hi, my name is Atul Tamari. I am the president of the Inventrepreneurs Group. We have presence on most social media platforms, including Facebook and Twitter and so on, and not Threads as yet. The aim of the group is to educate business owners, startups, inventors, on how they can bring their product to market, and how they can learn from the mistakes that we all make starting a business, thinking we can things are a certain way when it's just in our minds. It's not really the case in real life. That's what usually happens. So if I knew all the things that I know now when I started my business, I would be 20 years ahead of where I am right now. And that's why I started this group in 2013. I invite very well-known people that you've probably seen in the other videos. And today I have the pleasure of the presence of Chris Matthews, who wrote this book, Start Telling People, which is going to help you as a startup or as generally as an entrepreneur do a better job of marketing your business. So without further ado, please could you introduce yourself, Chris, and then if you could tell us a little bit about your bio and why you wrote this book.
Fantastic. Well, first, thanks for should be on the show. I have been doing marketing for startups for over a decade now, and most of that was in the Bay Area. I also spent a couple of years working with startups in Europe, partly during COVID. And so I've seen all manner of hardware, software, agriculture, robotics, AI, the whole spectrum. And through all of it, I've either been a consultant or in some cases a consultant that then led to becoming the first marketing hire at a startup to help come in and run the program, build out the team, set the strategy. And I've started to see some patterns over the decade or so I've been doing it. And that prompted me to take a few months off, 6 months off actually, and write the book. And so what the book is an encapsulation of all of the things I wish I'd known when I was first getting into startup marketing. I came originally from consumer sporting goods, so spent a lot of time working in the bicycle industry, actually. And a lot of what I learned there ended up transferring over to startup world quite well. And what you'll see in the book are the patterns I've seen of what makes marketing at an early stage startup unique, right? Why a standard marketing 101 textbook doesn't quite capture the trials and tribulations and challenges that early startups face, and also what rules you can break because you're young and nimble and can move. And so some of these are lessons I learned by screwing things up. Other ones are lessons I learned by getting things right. And in every case, it was an example of working with generally really smart engineers and really great teams, because it takes a village, and that is all covered in the book.
So what's actually the underlying thesis of the book? And do you coach, or how do you coach an early stage startup to apply the sort of thinking that you propose in your book?
The underlying thesis of the book is that marketing is a discipline. It's not just an activity. So what I mean by that is it's not just something you go do on occasion. It's not an island that you go visit once in a while. It's something you have to bake into your company's strategy. And startups have this potential superpower in that they can bring marketing in as a discipline from the very early days. And what that means is that you have to treat marketing as something that's part of everything that you do. A good metaphor here that I like to use is actually downhill skiing. So like anybody can go downhill skiing for the day, and rent gear and have a good time. And, that's great. But if you want to be a pro skier, right? Like you actually want to go win a World Cup race or something like that. Generally, you start when you're very young and you practice a ton, and you have to be aware of like what's happening consciously and unconsciously, right? So it's like, it's not just the muscles for skiing, but it's like understanding the nuance of equipment and weather patterns and nutrition and sleep and your competitors and altitude and, right? Just keeps going. And so as a parallel to marketing, understanding that marketing isn't just like an ad campaign, it's that every decision you make as an entrepreneur is a marketing decision to some degree. Even things like where we put our next factory can have branding implications. Things like what goes on your packaging or where you source from can all have brand implications. And they can all paint you into corners that you can avoid if you think about it in advance. So that's the overall theory of the book. And as I work with startups and startups I'm coaching, it usually starts from very first principles of, can we define things like, what is it that you do, right? Why are you chasing down this startup, this idea? And what is the position you want to take in the market so that you can help establish that and make it stick? And then once you've got your position, then you can start working on things like identity, and you can start working on things like your marketing and brand strategy and how everything is going to support those early pillars, early fundamentals. And a lot of this can start well before you've ever put up a website. So one of the things I like to coach earlier companies with is the idea that you got to give marketing a little bit of time before you're ready, because there's a lot of work, foundation work, that needs to happen to support that day one, right? The point of day one isn't to look like it's day one. The point of day one is to look like you've been working hard on this and you're ready to show something off.
So what are some of the examples of how marketing for a startup, for example, is different to marketing a large company or
Sure.
a local store?
A lot of it has to do with time horizons. So marketing for startups can be very dynamic, right? Like things like, what is your vision or your mission, or what is your product for a startup? Those can pivot pretty substantially early on as you learn new things, as you start testing theories and validating theories, because you're doing stuff that's new, right? And so part of this is this tension between wanting to develop stuff that's really secure and wanting to not be locked into things that you can't change, right? You have to accept that anything can change, but that doesn't absolve you of asking yourself the hard questions of like, why is it we are here? Can we communicate that and actually get on the same page for the story of what we're trying to do? Because that will help define who you get to hire. It will help define the media you might be able to get early on. It can help define who will invest in you. And so that tension early on of going through the exercise and making the effort to do hard work, like defining, your market position as one great example. Big companies do this and they never change it. Small companies still have to do it, even though it might change.
That's a very very valid point. I know in chapter 5 you explore how the customer sees the company, and that's a very difficult problem for any business, in that you can't see yourself as the customer.
Right.
And even big corporations, even my own company, I've had what I think of how it works is different to what the customer thinks. Can you give me a little context on why you included that in your book?
Of course. There's an adage that I heard this a long time ago, and I don't remember who I'd heard it from, so I don't know who to give credit to. But the idea that you have to know your customer and know you're not the customer. And that's a tough thing for some people to grab onto, because in many cases, especially with entrepreneurs, you're doing something because you want it, right? And so you might be one of the customers. That's okay, but don't fall into the myopic trap of thinking you're the only customer. And once you've thought about like who your customer is, one of the really interesting exercises that the models I've developed over the years is to think about the whole life cycle of your customer from discovery, right? Like, how do they find you? What's that feel like? What's that look like? Where are they discovering you? How many times might they see you? What's that discovery experience really look like or feel like? And for you, for an entrepreneur, you get to decide, what do you want it to be like, right? Write that down. Like, what is the discovery experience you're hoping to create? A group of the people that discover you then go on to buy it, right? There's a purchase experience. So this is experience number 2. What's that purchase experience like? Is it on Amazon? Is it direct from you? Is it something that they get at a local store? Do they get a thank you card? Do they get a receipt? Do they get an email after? All of the process of like, what's it like for them to go through that whole process and give you money, right? Map that out, write it down. What do you want it to be like? The third one is use experience. So, okay, they own the thing. They now have your product. What's it actually like to use? Does it do the thing they thought it would do, or does it delight them in new ways? Does it fit into their life the way that your promise said it would? And how do they use it, right? What is that day-to-day experience like? And then there's a fourth experience that even goes beyond that, and that's the ownership experience. So what is it like to be an owner of your thing or your service? This is where you get into really rampant brand loyalty and clubs and owners groups and Facebook groups and things like that. It's the comparable thing of like, if you have a Ducati in the garage, you have a feeling about that thing even when you're not riding it. And so that ownership experience is worthwhile to think about very carefully, because it's something you're going to curate over years. And so if you think about that whole spectrum, right? Discovery, purchase, use, ownership, and map out what you want it to be for your customer, all of a sudden, now your perspective is shifted, right? You're not thinking about supply chain. You're not thinking about packaging. You're not thinking about UPC codes. Like it's much closer to the things that end customer is going to care about and what they're going to feel because of you.
Yes, I mean, you come across that over the first time I come across what you're saying was with Alta Vista. I don't know if people would remember that one, but Google came out of the blue because their customer experience was just so much better. They, just a page, you just do a search with Alta Vista. There's all sorts of additional noise on the page that was just annoying, and Google took off. So I fully understand what you're saying on that front. It's very difficult for the entrepreneur to put themselves. I would say it's impossible, to be honest. You absolutely need a coach, because it's like the entrepreneur is in a bottle. There's a label on the bottle. They think people see that label and know what's in the bottle or what they think is in the bottle, but the entrepreneur can never read that label because he's in the back of it and he can't get out of the bottle to do it.
There's a thread through the book that shows up a few times that I think echoes exactly what you're saying, which is there are translation layers in any business where, say, early on, you have to translate from engineering speak into product speak, right? or you have to translate from engineering into marketing speak, like taking the information out into the world in a way that does justice to the product, but meets the customer where they wanted to be. And so translations between product and marketing, translations between engineering and product, between engineering and marketing, between marketing and customer service, right? All of those, they're talking about fundamentally similar things, but in some cases quite different language. And if you think about it from that standpoint, it makes it makes it easier to work with benevolent intent, right? To assume benevolent intent in your colleagues and understand like what they're saying is something I have to work into different language to meet the need of the person I'm taking this to. Doesn't mean that you disagree. It's just a polished layer.
One of the problems, especially when you're raising money or trying to raise money, is giving a product demo. And I know that you're very familiar with that. So can you kind of tell us what are the fundamentals of giving a good product demo?
So this skews a little more heavily towards like product or hardware type products, but it matters for software too. Ultimately, someone is going to ask you the question, what does it do? And to sort of echo that translation layer comment from a little earlier, what does it do doesn't mean how does it work. What does it do means what does it do for me? And like this is a customer question to you, or someone asking on behalf of the customer, right? So thinking about not explaining how it works, but explaining all the way through to the benefit it provides in some cases, or in some cases, you're working on like something that's so radically new, has never been seen before. And you have to paint the picture of like the future you are building and why they want to participate in that. And that is a core to understanding demo, is understanding that they want to know what it does for them. And then if you answer that question well, they say, show me. And so now it's on you to show them a demo. And some of the biggest companies absolutely fail demos, right? We've seen it, right? You've seen Steve Jobs fail a demo because the auditorium was full of people. And when they practiced, it wasn't full of people. So the Wi-Fi wasn't clogged up with a few hundred other phones. We've seen Elon Musk put a steel ball through the window of a pickup truck. They didn't practice that. If they had, they would have known that wasn't going to work. So back to that idea of marketing as a discipline, this is the other side of the discipline of like, this is where creativity kind of stops. And there's no engineering in public, right? There's no benefit to letting people see you fiddling with knobs or testing new code. It's like, nope, pencils down. This is a show. And giving a demo is a skill, right? Like this is an absolute skill in the same way that TV producers or TV anchors on the news just look natural when they're talking. They got really good at that. They didn't start out really good at that. And giving a demo is the same. It's practice, 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 practice. And in terms of actually doing it, there's generally 4 things that I've found are really helpful. The first one is, and this is the one that people mostly forget, there's a certain amount of time it takes to prepare for a demo. Every company is going to be different. Some of them, like you're right away ready. Others, you've got to like coordinate with a partner, or there's a weather condition that matters, or there's a location, whatever it is. There's some amount of time that's set from someone requests a demo to the time you're ready to give a demo. Establish what that is for you. Make it as short as you can, but establish what it is, and then stick to it. really quickly you get to people saying, oh, don't worry, it's just me. Or like, I don't care if it's rough, or like, I just need some B-roll, or, this is off the record. Any of these excuses to do a quick demo and not prep, don't do it. Like all of this is that little voice that's trying to get you to screw up. And if you can't give the time that you need to prep for a demo, don't do the demo, right? It's better to not do it, because not doing a demo is better than a failed demo, and failed demos kill startups. So that's the first thing. Second thing is a pre-flight checklist, right? What do you have to check in advance? Make it a checklist, go through it each time, check off everything, right? Is Wi-Fi working? What's everyone wearing? Who's the presenter? Is the guest parking spot blocked off? Like all the things. And go through that checklist point by point every single time. And then the script, which is actually a script, right? You're telling a story at this point. It's not a spec list. It's not like an explainer video or like your website. It's a narrative that you develop that tells the person sort of why they're there, why you chose them, what you do, where you came from, and shows them what the product does, right? All the context that they might need for understanding the thing you want to show them. And one tip on building scripts, start with storyboards, like treat it like a video. The storyboard idea is really helpful because it separates visuals from words. And that means you have to separate, what do I say and what do I show? And the advantage there is that using storyboards, it makes it very difficult to build a script that requires you to say something you can't show. That's where you run into trouble, is if you say something you can't show, you risk the audience saying, well, call me when that's ready. And at that point, it's like you didn't do the demo anyway. So start with storyboards, work that into a script, establish your cadence. And then the fourth bit is the post-flight checklist, right? Reset everything, talk with the group that is involved, understand what questions came up. Maybe they were good questions. Maybe they should affect the script that you have, and like maybe you should update your script. Think about where did things go wrong, and how are we going to mitigate against that if any issues showed up. Reset everything, recharge everything, get ready for the next one. Basically, prep up the next time. So define the time, pre-flight, script, post-flight.
Very much like movie making, basically. the story that has a beginning, middle, and end.
Absolutely. This is theater, right? This is magic. Like it's a fundamentally different thing than the product. And it's worth giving as much time to your demo as you gave to the product. Like they're different things. But if you want your product to look really good, engineer the demo to make it look that way.
I've been to numerous such demos, and sometimes people are just not good at giving demos. They're just not good at presenting. What should a startup do in that case? What would be a solution for that?
There are coaches you can work with that will help you with presentation skills. And that gets to everything from what to wear and how to do like neutral makeup and how to do lighting, to how to manage your cadence of speaking and how to make eye contact and use body language. All these factors are things that are subconsciously picked up by people, but they're not obvious right away, but they can be learned. Another really good one is if you work with a PR agency, they tend to be quite good at this sort of thing as well. Or they know who to call to get you some help. And they have done this because they put people in front of cameras all the time, right? That's part of their job. And so if you treat it like giving an interview or being on TV, or like you said, making a movie, it introduces a lot of the same discipline, a lot of the same thought patterns, and a lot of the same specificity of how you need to act so that you can reliably do this over and over and over again, right? Like the goal of a demo, right? Demo has one goal. You need to make the audience believe that they saw a perfect demo. Now that's different than giving a perfect demo. And part of that is the magic of like, I can move stuff around. You've never seen this before. You don't know the script in advance, right? As the audience. If I move features like and give you features out of order, it doesn't matter. But maybe I did that because my robot just, lost connection to Wi-Fi. And I switched to a different feature and my engineer saw that and is quickly jumping onto RViz and like rebooting the robot and getting it back on Wi-Fi. The audience never saw that. But because we practiced all of these mitigation techniques to make sure the audience believed that they saw a perfect demo, they leave happy. And you leave with whatever it was that you wanted, right? Funding or a new closing a hire or closing a sale or getting media coverage. Also, one other quick thing on demos, there's sort of three things you should chase: consistency, accuracy, and validity. Consistency being like the demo should be the same no matter who gives it. It shouldn't be sort of a renegade free for all, depending on like if the CFO gives one versus the CEO or the CTO or your marketing person or whoever. You should agree that you're all on the same song sheet. And then the validity piece is like the audience needs to believe or needs to care about the things that you're telling them, right? You should show something that the audience actually cares about. And then accuracy is like the third one. All your engineers should be like, yep, that's right. Like it might not have all the details in it, but you haven't glossed over stuff so much that they feel like you haven't done a service to the product.
Yeah. So when you have a startup, there's no information, there's no feedback for a long time from any customers because you don't have any. And then when the customers come along, it's a flood of information, flood of data, and you don't know what to do with all that data. So it's kind of like you start off with virtually no information about anything from a customer point of view, and then you get so much information you don't know what to do with it. So can you tell us about how a startup should think about data and using it?
Yeah. The catch with data is like data doesn't care, right? Data is absolutely agnostic. And my general startup theory with data is data will beat opinions, right? If someone has an opinion, you can show data that contradicts that or shows why that's no longer true, then that data wins. If all you have is opinions, it's going to be the opinion probably of the highest paid person in the room. But if you have data, you can beat that. However, insights beat data, right? If you can actually think what's going to happen in the future based on patterns you've seen and predict outside the data set, that's where entrepreneurs really shine, right? Like that's where someone says, I see the future and it's going to look like this. I'm going to go build it. What's difficult there is like understanding the risk of working outside the data set and identifying whether or not it's hubris or whether or not it's actually an insight. And as one example, the best example is unfortunately one of the most tragic. The Space Shuttle Challenger disaster back in the 80s, that when it blew up like a little more than a minute after takeoff. And that was because the O-rings that held those fuel cells together failed because it was too cold, right? They'd never done a launch in that temperature. ever. And so they were predicting outside the temperature data set that they would be okay when they were very much not okay. So there's an example of like, those people had the data they needed to make a decision, and they made a wrong decision based on getting a bad presentation. More data there would have shown that the pragmatic approach would have been the right one. So data for startups tends to be quite scarce. Like, you don't have very much. That doesn't mean you don't have access to very much. If you've never gone to Google and typed data set colon and then your industry, right, or your space or your category, go try that, because you'd be amazed at how much data is out there for free, like city data, geographic data, GIS data, like all kinds of different types of data that, yeah, it might not be specifically you, but it could be very much relevant to you. And then you have to think about like, okay, if I know that about these things over here, what can I reasonably extrapolate about my product or my space or my competitors for that matter? So don't be afraid to go look for it. And in the advent of like, in the absence of that information, go ask, right? Like, if you have customers, run a survey. If you don't have customers, you can run a survey, right? You can run a national survey, get 1,000 respondents for like a couple bucks a response, and you can run a 10-question survey. They can never know who sent them the survey, but you'll get a statistically valid trend of like what people think about the questions you've asked. The harder part is designing the survey, but it's entirely possible with, you know, things like, you know, SurveyMonkey is one, but there's lots of options out there to do it, to get really good actionable data back just by sending out a survey. So don't fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I'm a startup, I don't have any data, so I'll just guess at stuff. Like, do the work, go dig, find it. You know, data really has one job, and it's to help you make better decisions. It's to reduce your risk or increase your confidence. And every little bit of data that you get increases the confidence of the decisions you get to make. The biggest mistake is assuming you have none.
Yes, that's I remember that particular shuttle launch because it was carrying a satellite that on a project that I worked on, and it took 15 years to get back to where we were after that. One of the new tools that has come along, ChatGPT, for example, you can ask it questions, although it's not necessarily reliable. It will give you some information about data. The future, I guess, is going to be prompt engineering or whatever to get the information from the AIs. There are, as far as data is concerned, one of the startups that I worked in, we used to have arguments about things all the time, and then we finally decided that we'd just, you know, go out and ask people, literally, you know, find out, and then there was no argument. You know, this is what the A/B test said, and there's no opinion involved. So
You have to be very careful that you don't engineer your survey to get the answer that you want.
right. Well, that's when there's multiple people, you agree on what the survey should be before it goes out.
Exactly.
What would be your? I mean, I think we should be wrapping up our chat now. I know you're busy doing other things. What would be your number one advice to a startup? Obviously, buying your book. That would be your number one advice. But other than that, what would be your if there was one thing that you would you know, you're in an elevator and a startup person asks you, what you know, what's your number one advice?
It's a tough question to blanket across everyone, but there's a fundamental importance to understanding what position you want to hold in the market, like what you aspire to be. And building your product is not the same as building your position. Those are two different things. And you can't just assume that by making your product, you will gain this position. That in some cases, if you were like crafting a totally new category of a thing, making your product doesn't create the category. There's a whole bunch of other work that you have to do to understand and help your customers understand, like, what changes, what does this replace, who benefits, who loses, what change in behaviors are they going to have to undertake to benefit from the thing you're doing, and why should they care, right? All of these factors go into establishing your position. And if you don't have a solid position from the start, everything else is very fragile. And so I would coach any early entrepreneur to really dig and make sure you understand the market position you want to own and maintain and control, and be wide-eyed about what that means in terms of who's going to fight you for that, who's going to object to that, where are your pain points going to be, how long should it take you, all of these factors that are involved in positioning. But if and when you nail it, it makes so many other decisions so much more obvious and so much easier, because you're chasing down this position.
Right. If people wanted to find out more about your book and you, what's the web address they should go to?
It's a really tough web address. Starttellingpeople.com. So pretty straightforward. And so from there, you can find the book. My own consulting site is verysmallrobots.com, which is also pretty easy to find. I'm on LinkedIn through either of those methods. Both of them will point back to me. And yeah, I'm based in California, so Pacific time zone. So usually around up and around by 7 a.m. and kicking around till dinner.
Great, thank you so much. It's been a wealth of information. I don't even know where to begin. I'm going to have to watch this video myself a few times. So are there any other books in the horizon for you?
Well, this one just came out, so like the ink is still pretty warm on this. I'm still going to take a little break now and get back to work, and I really want to put the ideas of the book out to work. So doing a few talks, I'm guest lecturing at UC Berkeley right now. Got a couple book events coming up, so that's been pretty fun. And we'll see. But I love to write, and it wouldn't surprise me if there are follow-ups, but that's a ways off at the moment. But I want to compliment you on like running this show and like having this resource to these entrepreneurs, because like it gets lonely out there. So like you're doing good work, and this stuff's important, and not enough people do it. So thanks, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, my pleasure. You're also absolutely right. You find yourself talking to yourself about things as an entrepreneur, you know, arguing with yourself about things. There's no rules written, and any information like this is, I wish I had it when I was starting, like I said at the beginning.
And I'd love any feedback that you or any of your audience has, like things I've said that you agree with, disagree with, want to talk about. Like, let me know. I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I hope you join our Facebook group, and you know, answer the questions yourself. Your video will be pinned at the top, and people will be hopefully commenting on it and letting us know about it. Thank you so much, and I hope we'll meet again under even better circumstances.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Right. Bye for now.